Hi, Smarter News. I'm Holly McKay. I am a journalist and a war correspondent. I know that many of you have questions about what is happening in Syria, so I wanted to provide a little bit of context for you. I first went to Syria in 2016 and have visited since. I, at the time, was working on a book called Only Cry for the Living, Memoirs from Inside the ISIS Battlefield, that as well as covering the ISIS fight, I was also covering the ongoing war in Syria, which started in 2011. It began with peaceful protests and really exploded into something else when the Bashar al-Assad regime really fought back with an incredible iron fist. What we should know about what's happening is that Syria itself is not controlled by one entity. Of course, the Bashar al-Assad regime is still in power in Damascus and has control over a majority of the country, but it is really beholden to Iranian and Russian power and forces to kind of keep it in place. You also have Kurdish-controlled areas, the SDF, which is primarily backed by the United States. And you also have Turkey that is supporting militia groups, one in particular called HTS, which used to be affiliated with Al-Qaeda. It has since distanced itself. And up until last weekend, they were controlling just Idlib. And they made a very surprise push into Aleppo that is marked a very dramatic shift in power. Surprisingly, or not surprisingly, the US actually responded on December 3 with what they called a self-defense airstrike. And as it stands, there are about 900 US troops that are still stationed in Syria, primarily to stop an ISIS resurgence and primarily working with those Kurdish groups that the United States has long supported in this fight. Now, the HTS move into Aleppo is a big deal because Aleppo is really a strategic point of Syria. It's critical for controlling the trade routes and influencing, I think, the broader war's dynamics. It does shift the power balance, and it could mean the beginnings, again, of a much larger scale war in Syria, which doesn't just stay in Syria. It also influences the broader region and the United States because we do have interest there and a number of troops. And why is this happening now? Assad, despite the atrocities of the regime, has managed to stay in power with a very little fight against him. But he is beholden to Russia and Iranian forces. And so without their support, he is very weakened. And that has shown in the past couple of years because Russia has been very distracted with its own conflict in Ukraine. Iran, of course, is very distracted with everything else happening in Gaza and Lebanon. And so that really provided a window of opportunity for HTS to come in and really highlights the weakness of the Assad regime and its inability to be able to stand and govern on its own. And what we should watch out for next. We could have further United States involvement if attacks do threaten troops. We could have counter attacks from Assad and Russia and Iran, which are already happening, but they could certainly increase in scale. And you have the potential for really spillover effects into the region. So I certainly think we're going to be hearing much more about Syria in the coming months and into 2025, and unfortunately we will probably see a lot more casualties and a lot more bloodshed in a war that has never come to a resolution.